Welcome back, boxing fans. I was listening to Dante's Boxing Nation, and of course, Dante is doing what Dante does. There's no real fighter currently at 154 pounds Dante supports, because there's no black American fighter currently at 154 pounds for him to support. Obviously, he can't shit on Fundora because he's with the PBC, but he also can't support him. So, what does he do? He does what guys like him always do. He looks for a target that's a non black fighter, primarily a Latina or a Latin fighter, not a Latina, so he could shit on them. And in this case, of course, that's Virgil Ortiz. The irony is, Virgil Ortiz is not currently a world champion. So he could not have a unification fight with Murtazaliev because he is an interim champion. The champion with the WBC is currently Funduro, who's also the WBO champion, right? Obviously, Bud Crawford was the WBA champion, and Murtazaliev is the IBF champion. Bud Crawford just dropped his title, so we have to see what exactly happens with the WBA, who they elevate into that position. I don't think anything specifically has happened yet, or if it has, I missed that. But the irony is, going out of your way to shit on Ortiz, who literally just fought Madrimov in a fantastic performance, beating him far more convincingly than Bud Crawford beat him. That doesn't mean he's better than Crawford. It just means stylistically it was a better matchup for him than it was for Bud. And he came off of that performance after fighting very tough fighter Boholchuk, a fighter that Funduro was supposed to fight, but still has not fought him yet, even though he didn't fight at all last year. Literally, he beat Tim Tszyu to win the 2 titles and sat around for a whole fucking year doing diddly squat, not unifying with any of the other champions, Bud Crawford or anybody else, literally doing nothing but waiting for an Aerospence pay-per-view fight, which obviously did fall through. But Ortiz is the guy people should be criticizing. Wrap your head around that and ask yourself, how can a guy who's not even currently a champion be the one who's being criticized, even though he's stayed busy, he's fought top competition, right? Unlike Fundura, who sat around, did nothing, came back to fight a low-level opponent in Booker, and he gets a pass. We understand why Murtazaliev isn't busy, because basically he's been ducked for years. He was ducked by Charlo for probably 2 years before Charlo became undisputed, right? Obviously, he fought on undercards of Charlo's fights for the PBC, but the PBC never felt confident in actually have him getting the opportunity to fight Charlo. And of course, Bud Crawford is moving up to 168 pounds to take on Canelo Alvarez. So, I mean, for me as a boxing fan, I don't really find it necessary to criticize and hate on any of these fighters. The only criticism I have for Fundura is mostly revolving around his promoter, who's kept him inactive for a year and then brought him back with a low-level opponent and potentially is going to put him back in with some in-house PBC fighter and not give us unification fights. He's probably going to get stripped by the WBO because Xander Zayas is mandatory. So, the criticism obviously goes to his promoter, who historically has done this again and again and again. So we can see who to blame. As far as the fighters in this division, it's a great division. Boxing fans just want these guys to face each other. Whoever, whether it's Virgil Ortiz fighting Murtazaliev, Funduro fighting Xander Zayas, Charles Conwell and somebody else fighting for that vacant WBA title. That's what fans want. They don't need to come here, make a video shitting on one specific fighter who really is probably the fighter who shouldn't really be shit on and criticized, because he's doing more than the champions are doing, and that's a fact. Right? But you think what they would want to do was mostly boost up, hype up the division, the fighters in it, and the possible matchups we could get from all the fighters there. Charlo apparently is coming back. That adds another big name to this group. Of course, that's probably who Funduro is going to fight, because that's the in-house PBC pay-per-view fight I was talking about. But nonetheless, you got a lot of good fighters in this division. Even the mid-tier guys like Ramos, who just fought obviously last weekend, Lubin, Tim Tszyu when he does come back, even though obviously he's fighting Spencer, who is a complete fucking bum in his next fight. But there's still a lot of competition. So you got to ask yourself, what really is a guy like Dante doing when he makes a video like that? Well, you know what he's doing. He's race baiting. He's taking the opportunity to shit on highly regarded non-black American fighters. And the irony is, Ortiz is American. So if you really do support American fighters, you figure you'd support Ortiz, a guy out of Texas, right? Obviously has a growing fan base, an exciting style, a very good fighter. This was a guy who literally just tried to make a fight with Boots Ennis, right? It wasn't him that walked away from a Boots Ennis fight. It was literally Boots Ennis ducking Virgil Ortiz, right? Yet this was a fight people have been talking about for years now, dating back to when they were both at 147 pounds. So I really find it difficult to justify some way to shit on this guy, considering this was a guy who on short notice was going to fight Tim Tszyu on an undercard of the Bud Crawford fight card, right? Remember that? Coming out of nowhere, all of a sudden Ortiz jumped in to face Tim Tszyu. The reason that didn't happen is because Tim Tszyu pulled out of that fight. If anything, Virgil Ortiz has shown you that literally he's up for fighting everyone. If he's not fighting Murtazaliev next, it's probably because he's a WBC fucking interim champion and he's waiting for the WBC to put him into a fight with Funduro to get that legitimate WBC title, where then he could of course fight Murtazaliev for unification. But as he's not currently the champion, how could he fight for unification? He couldn't.